A lot of our players give back and people don't even know because they're not doing it for the recognition. And so I understand people have lots of opinions, but also these players, like I said, are very young. They have the weight of the world on their shoulders, and that's something that people don't see. We also want to set them up for generational wealth. So a lot of these players come from situations or backgrounds where they didn't grow up with money. And so, one, how do we set them up, right? So that they are creating this wealth for generations to come, but then also setting them up for success in terms of how they're giving back to their communities. And so I understand that, people see these large contracts and they have to understand, similar to us, they're seeing a fraction of what is being reported. And then after that, they're going to put money away for investments and 401ks. And I think people see the flashiness of what they consider, and not all players are like that. And even if players are flashy, they are, truly giving back in meaningful ways. But that story is not always told either.
Welcome to Black Philanthropy, Our Stories, where each episode spotlights awesome Black and African American leaders committed to transforming lives and communities through philanthropy. These authentic conversations will inspire, challenge, and remind you are not alone. Here's your host, award-winning writer, director, and founder of Samuel and Murray, Michelle Renee Jackson.
Hello there. We are so grateful for you today. Thank you for trusting us with your time today. We are so proud of this work that Black leaders are doing in the space of philanthropy. And I am so honored to be able to introduce our next guest. Erika Swilley is the ED, or the Executive Director, for the MBPA Foundation. And MBPA stands for the National Basketball Players Association. It is another way of saying it is the union for the NBA players. And Erika runs the foundation for the MBPA. And so, Erika, we are so grateful for you. If you are seeing this episode either on Spotify or on YouTube, you will notice that this episode has been recorded over the course of 2 days. And the reason for that is because Erika and I had a really awesome conversation during our first recording. And then later that night when I was folding clothes, of course, all these new questions, follow-up questions came about that I didn't get a chance to either one even think of when we were actually having the conversation. And so then I asked Erika if she'd be open to doing a follow-up recording, and she is. And so Erika, again, thank you for your conversation a couple of days ago, and then for our conversation today. So Erika, for those who don't already know you personally or are not connected to you on LinkedIn, you have a pretty good following on LinkedIn and social media. Can you share a little bit about who you are and what you're up to in the world these days?
Thank you, Michelle, for having me on this platform and for bringing Black philanthropy stories to light. I've been in this role for about 2 years now, coming up on 2 years. And prior to that, I worked for various MBA and WNBA teams leading their philanthropy foundations. So I kind of this work is really rooted in, I would say, who I am and my upbringing. My mom is a social worker, a therapist. Growing up, I saw her continuously helping others and giving back. She kind of ingrained in us from an early age the mindset that if you are able to help others, you do it. And it's not, you don't ask questions. It's just like, if you have the ability to help, then that's what you're called to do. And you need to step up to that call. And so I knew I didn't want to be a social worker, and I knew I didn't want to be a therapist, but I knew that I wanted to do something where I could help others and I could give back in a meaningful way. So I always thought that I would work for a nonprofit or for a foundation of some sort, some type of community work. I just didn't really know how that would look. So I had various internships. I worked for various companies, all that had kind of community rooted in the work that I was doing. then I saw a job posting at the Detroit Pistons for kind of like an entry-level position in their community relations department. And when I read the description, it just kind of encompassed everything that I was passionate about, loved to do in terms of planning events from A to Z, and just really getting my hands dirty. And so I was just like, okay, this is interesting. I applied for the role. I got the job. And then once I got into the role and I was able to see the power of sport and how it really unites people and how it is this amazing platform that brings people from all different backgrounds kind of into the fold, and the attention that, these sports teams receive and their athletes receive, I was like, wow, I can do this community work, but at such a high level, and really invoke change that some organizations just can't do. And that's kind of what's kept me. And so now I've been working in sports and philanthropy for 20 plus years now.
Let's back up for a moment, Erika, about the sense of philanthropy, the role that your mother played in all of that. One of the things that we often talk about in the space of philanthropy is what is philanthropy, because I think a lot of people have different perspectives on philanthropy. I often say on the show that one of the most Googled questions that exists right now related to philanthropy is, what is philanthropy? And so for you and your experience to date, both as someone who's grown up in the space of philanthropy, but also someone who's working in the space of philanthropy, what is philanthropy?
I feel like philanthropy can be different things. To your point, you can start small. It doesn't have to be, a grand gesture. I think going to volunteer is philanthropy. Yes, donating money is philanthropy. We always tell folks, if you can tap into your time, your talent, and your treasure to help others and give back, that's philanthropy. And so whatever that looks like for you, in terms of helping others, to me is philanthropy. Yes, some people have foundations and are doing this work at a very high level, but I feel like just reaching back and helping those within your circle and in your community is philanthropy.
Oftentimes when we talk about philanthropy, we talk about love for one another, love for humanity. And I wonder for you, in that definition of philanthropy, is there a role that love plays?
I love what I do. I love being able to connect the dots in terms of this work that I do, but then also the work that our players are doing and helping them really tap into this. But I always say that our players, they need to figure out what they're passionate about, what's love for them and what they're connected to. Because if they just pick something to check a box, then that momentum is going to fizzle. But if it's something that it's ingrained in them, and that they have a love for, then it's not going to seem like, work. It's going to be, I'm doing this because I love to do this community give back.
Can you help our listeners understand what the relationship is between the NBA and the MBPA, and then where the foundation plays in all of that?
We have a great relationship with the NBA. I work very closely with their team. The NBA is focused on the teams and the work that the teams are doing in the philanthropy space. For me, I work for the union that represents the players. And so I am focused on our players and helping them around their philanthropic strategy. I advise them not to start their own foundations.
Oh, interesting. Let's talk there. Why is that?
So a lot of our players are very young. They're 18, 19, I say they don't know what they don't know. And oftentimes people will become a professional athlete, and I think it's just ingrained in them, like, okay, I'm a professional athlete. I want to give back to my community and help others. Let me start a foundation. But they don't realize everything that goes into starting a foundation and how much work it is and how much legality is involved, how much tax implications are involved, and making sure that they're setting it up the right way. So unless they are really going into setting up a foundation and making sure that they're doing it the right way and they have the right people leading it, then I'm here to show them how they can do the work that they want to do at a high level without starting a foundation, starting a DAF, a donor advisory fund, having a fiscal sponsor, or simply working with already established nonprofits or foundations that would be more than willing to partner with them on joint efforts and initiatives.
LaDainian Tomlinson, we just did an episode with him. Of course, LT is a Hall of Famer for the Chargers. And one of the things he talked about was that he was a big advocate of players having their own foundations. That for him, having a foundation meant that you actually had more skin in the game. But then also what we talked about, he and I, was that, but then if you don't know how to run a foundation, how do you run a foundation? And so it sounds like what you're doing then is creating a additional option. And so how do you help players identify which of those options would be a good one for them?
We have conversations with the players and then their inner circles, which can be anyone from their agent to their parents to their significant other, and just kind of learning more about where they are on their journey. I don't expect them to come to me and know and have everything figured out. But once I kind of get an understanding of what they're looking to do and what goals they're trying to accomplish, then we can kind of point them in the right direction. I mean, starting a foundation is great. I say, look at starting a foundation maybe closer to the end of your career. I often reference, Steph Curry, LeBron James have really well-run foundations, but you also have to look at the teams that they have running these foundations and the resources and money that they're putting behind these foundations. And if you're not willing to do the same, then I'm going to advise you to go in a different direction, at least to start.
Why the recommendation for starting a foundation towards the end of one's career?
Is they're getting older and mature, and they have a little bit more experience, then, we can talk through what a foundation looks like. And I say towards the end of your career, because then you have more time and effort to put towards it. Again, I want to get these guys to think differently about philanthropy and how they're showing up so that it's not just a checkbox. It's not saying I have a foundation to say that I have a foundation, but really having a foundation that is making true impact.
How many players are you responsible for, Erika?
We represent all 450 plus players that play in the NBA, though not all of them use our services.
Do you also work with former players or it's only active players?
I have a really close relationship with the Retired Players Association, and my foundation does support retired players as well.
Erika, are you noticing any trends in the kind of impact the players want to have that they're demonstrating through working with the foundation?
What we do know is majority of our players are giving to the communities in which they're from or which they play, which makes sense. We're seeing a lot of giving around back to school. We see a lot of giving around the holidays. And for me, it's about educating them about how they can kind of take those moments and go a little bit deeper. I am on a campaign, anyone that knows me, I'm on a campaign right now to get guys to think differently around these moments. I'm trying to get rid of kind of the backpack giveaways and the turkey distributions and show them how they can take that money and use it to support students for the school year or to feed families for a year and not just a moment.
So what does that look like, helping them transition from giving out turkeys from maybe for Thanksgiving to then supporting a family or a student for the entire year?
Just having conversations in terms of, okay, you're looking to do a turkey drive, why? What is your reasoning behind this? And it's usually because, I know that a family is in need and, I want them to be able to have a nice meal around Thanksgiving. which I appreciate. But what if I could show you how to take the money you're using to buy 500 turkeys to pass out and still feed that family a nice meal for the day, but then also take some of that money and use it to feed that family for the year? Because if that family is in need for that moment, then I'm pretty sure that they're in need, past that day. And when I think we have these conversations, oftentimes, the light bulb will go off and they're like, well, of course I want to feed a family for, more than a day. So, okay, here's how we can do it and kind of make that impact. And this is what it can look like.
So one of the things that's so awesome about the work that you do, Erika, is that you get to work with these players that can feel, for many of us, sort of larger than life, very far off, that we don't get. Maybe we see them on Instagram doing something, but we don't actually get to see the intricacies of the sort of ways that they are really transforming lives. And so is there a story that comes to mind about what it actually looks like to see these players who are larger than life actually being in the midst of it all with their communities?
I'm super proud of all of our players. I will say that our players are very philanthropic. And, you spoke to LT in your last episode, and I'm sure he shared how the football community is also philanthropic as well. I would say that our guys are always finding ways to go above and beyond to help others. And I have, in my 2 years been here, I've had some amazing conversations with players, amazing programs. See, I've seen some amazing programs and guys doing great work and going a little bit deeper. Again, trying to, I would say, think about them reframing how they're giving and teaching them. One thing I try to teach them is that especially with, and I think we talked about this a little, was a lot of organizations are losing federal funding. And they technically are what we consider the private sector. And, kind of getting them to understand how they can fill that gap for some of these organizations that have lost money in the communities in which they're from and which they play. Our players, I would say, aren't just giving money. They're very hands-on when it comes to their philanthropy and their giving. I have been able to work with quite a few players in terms of figuring out how to use their platform to go a little bit deeper with some of the work that they're looking to do. We had a player who at the time, he no longer plays for this team, but at the time was playing for the Washington Wizards, that wanted for the holidays to do something impactful and meaningful. So partnered up with an organization in the area to help pay rent debt for citizens. And then it kind of started to snowball, and he had 3 more players join his efforts and initiatives to give money to pay off people's debt. But one thing that I said to the players when we got a nice pool of money from 4 different players, and then our foundation came in and matched their money, was that it is great to be able to pay off, people's rent debt, but how are you setting them up for long-term success? So not only did we pay off their rent debt, but we also worked with another organization that was able to set them up with financial literacy courses. And along with those financial literacy courses came additional funding to be put in an investment account so that they could learn about investing, they can learn about budgeting, and then that money will hopefully grow for them over time. So just showing the players, like, you guys are doing amazing things, but here's how you can take what you're doing, add to it to make sure that we're setting these people up for long-term success.
Part of what it sounds like you're doing, which a lot of our guests have talked about, is the sense of writing a check is awesome, but writing a check is not enough.
What's the root of the problem? Like, I don't want to just put a Band-Aid on it, but what is actually, the issue, and how can we solve for that? And that's another thing is that I tell players is that, like, we don't have all the answers. We're not always the experts. And so we have to listen. If you want to do work within a community or an organization, you have to listen to what their actual needs are. And then from there, we can figure out, okay, how can I best support?
Erika, one of the privileges of doing this work is being able to honor Black leaders all across the world, that we are everywhere in every continent. And for many of us in the U.S., of course, we descend from enslaved people. I descend from enslaved people, the Simuels, the Murrays, the Polks, the Armisteds, the Jacksons, of course. But that's where I come into this space of being in this country. And so I offer that same question to you about how you come into this space. Where you're people from?
I'm originally from Chicago, but I am biracial. So my mom is white and my dad is Black. But my dad's side of the family, Arkansas, Mississippi is kind of our roots.
Is there any one or any community of people that you think about as you're doing this work that helps you keep going, that you try to honor?
I definitely, in the work that I do, honor my mom. I honor the players who came before me and the players who are going to come after me, just because I want to set them up for success and for true impact. And if I can help these players, we always talk about with these players, generational wealth, and setting them up for generational wealth. And that also, when I think about what that looks like, being able to leave a legacy for their families and the community as well.
When people hear about these huge contracts that players get, I think a lot of people make assumptions about what they should be doing with their money. What do you think the broader public is misunderstanding or getting wrong when they think about NBA players and philanthropy? Or do you think that the broader public's perspective on how these players are showing up through philanthropy is accurate, if one could even know?
A lot of our players give back and people don't even know because they're not doing it for the recognition. And so I understand people have lots of opinions, but also these players, like I said, are very young. They have the weight of the world on their shoulders, and that's something that people don't see. We also want to set them up for generational wealth. So a lot of these players come from situations or backgrounds where they didn't grow up with money. And so one, how do we set them up, right? So that they are creating this wealth for generations to come, but then also setting them up for success in terms of how they're giving back to their communities. And so I understand that, people see these large contracts, and they have to understand, similar to us, they're seeing a fraction of what is being reported. And then after that, they're got to put money away for investments and 401ks. And I think people see the flashiness of what they consider, and not all players are like that. And even if players are flashy, they are, truly giving back in meaningful ways. But that story is not always told either.
Erika, is there an initiative that the foundation has launched recently, or certainly since your tenure that you've been there, that you're particularly proud of?
We did launch an initiative called Find in Philanthropic. And just to give you some background and context, and to talk about public perception, is when players are fined, technical fouls, ejections, and you see that, they've been fined X amount of money by the NBA, that money is then split between NBA and then our foundation. And because we're getting this money in through fines, we have a matching grant program. So players can come to us for a $25,000 match per season for their community initiatives and work that they're doing, as long as it's going to another 501c3. So that is what it is. When I took over this role, that program has been in place for many years, but I didn't feel like a lot of people knew what it was or that this was available to them. So I was like, we got to educate not only our players, but their inner circle about this money. I say, don't leave money on the table. If we can help amplify your efforts in the community, why would you not tap into that? And so my team and I, it was kind of an organic brainstorm, came up with Find and Philanthropic. I said, what guy does not want to be referred to as fine? And then philanthropic. So kind of playing a little bit to their egos. And so we worked with a artist. They created the logo Find and Philanthropic, and then we put it on a hat. We sent hats to every single player that also had information on their matching grants and how they could tap into that program.
How much money usually is a player getting fined for?
It varies depending on why they're getting fined. It can range anywhere from $2,000 to a few $100,000.
Oh, well, okay.
Just depending. I will say, at the union, though, we do help contest their fines. And so I don't get my pool of fine money until like the season's ended. We go through, some folks will get their money back depending on if their contest was
successful.
Sure. Yes, successful. And then that money, like I said, is split between us and the NBA Cares. Since we're the union that represents the players, we want to make sure that the money that we receive is going back to help amplify the players' work in the community.
How have the players responded to knowing that their fines are then used for philanthropy?
Yeah, that was another thing, is I wanted to make sure that players knew where their fine money was going, and be as transparent as possible. And I will say, I think guys appreciate knowing it's not just going into a pot of money that nobody knows where it's going to, but that it is being used not only to help community efforts and initiatives, but community efforts and initiatives that they...
Well, that's right.
That they care about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Each year, annually, about $500 billion is given through philanthropy, right? It comes from individuals, it comes from foundations, it comes from corporations. And we often all know that depending on which research or which report you're looking at, less than 5%, less than 3% actually goes to communities of color, Black communities. We know that Black people are the most philanthropic group in the country. We also know that Black people also have the lowest median income in the country. So we have the least income, but we also are the most philanthropic, which says a lot about, I think, who we are and what our values are. I also see in the midst of that you've got different communities working towards impact through philanthropy, but not necessarily talking to each other. So let's say you have Black funders, Black fundraisers, Black board members, Black advisors, all doing intentional work, but not necessarily in a way that is cohesive. And I often will always say, and why it's important, I think, to have you on the show, why it's important to have LT on the show and other players on the show, is to say that there's this whole other community, which you work directly with, pro athletes, in this case, NBA athletes, who are giving back, who want to be helpful, but are also sometimes what can feel like, I think for some of us in this space of philanthropy, on their own island. And so I just wondered, from your perspective, given that you are in an institution of philanthropy who's working with these players who are, for many people would say, doing their own thing in very quiet ways, but that there's this whole other space of foundation executives and fundraisers who are doing their other work. I wonder if you see any ways that the community of Black leaders, in which I would include pro athletes as part of those leaders in philanthropy, to start working more closely together instead of in different islands. Or does that sentiment, even that we are working in different islands, resonate with you?
Yes. That is something that we try to preach, is that there is power in the collective. And so that's part of my job too, is helping to connect the dots. I want to take players that have similar interests or who are working in the same space and say, hey, if you guys work together, you're going to be stronger. An example of that would be for the hurricanes that happened in Jamaica. We have 20 plus players that have ties to Jamaica. And so we were able to corral majority of them to say, hey, this is what each of you are doing when it comes to these relief efforts. Now, if you guys were to work together on this, you know what I mean? This is the impact that you could be making. So they were able to work together to then make a donation and support efforts happening in Jamaica. So we will try to take groups of players that we know that have a common interest goals and help them connect the dots. We help them connect the dots to other other foundations, nonprofits that are doing work in this space because, like I said, there is power in the collective and to not be so siloed. When I was doing work in Detroit, I think that's one of Detroit's superpowers is that the community will come together and there's no egos really in terms of like, okay, this is an issue. How can all of us organizations, nonprofits come together to really move the needle here. And that's really how you're going to get work done. I mean, it takes a village. And so I always say that my team is like air traffic control. Yeah. Like you come to us and we're going to try to help, connect those dots so that you're not on this island by yourself doing this work.
What is your dream for philanthropy? Because you are certainly part of the larger sector of philanthropy. And then what's your dream for players' philanthropy or their practice of philanthropy?
I'll start with my dream for players and their philanthropy. One, my dream is for them to all realize this really unique platform that they have and how they can tap into it to really move the needle and make a difference. And that if they worked closer together, that there are some issues that we could potentially solve. And we would just have to look at it from kind of a broader view instead of so hyper-focused, I would say, in the communities in which they're from or which they play, which is fine. I understand wanting to give back to where you're from, but there's some issues like one that keeps me up at night right now is kids not being able to eat, especially in the summertime with all the funding that's being pulled around summer feeding programs. And, if we were able to come together as a united group, that is probably something that we could help fund, nationwide. But we have some work to go. But yeah, I think eventually we can get there. My dream for the larger sector is, again, working together. I think people need to get out of the mindset that we need recognition. You're either here to do the work because you really want to do the work or you want the recognition. Recognition is great, but, I really would like people to come together to make sure that the work is being done.
I don't think that my life is random. I don't think that me showing up on this planet right now is random. I think there's some intention behind why I'm here. Whether I got to, some people ask the question of, did you get to choose to be here? Or did you just, or all of that, a different conversation for a different day. But that we're here right now is really what I think matters. And I wondered for you, if you had a sense of why do you think, if you think that you showing up on the planet right now is intentional, either by yourself or by somebody else, if it is intentional, why do you think that you're here doing this work right now and that you're not doing the work of the greater good 100 years from now or even 100 years ago?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I mean, I definitely think that I'm here right now for a reason. And I don't know why I was placed here right now, but I also say, why not? Or why not me? And so I can't think about why necessarily I was placed in this moment, but more so like I was placed in this moment because I was needed in this moment. And so I'm going to kind of rise to that challenge to make sure that there's purpose behind why I'm here and in this moment. And right now we are living in unique times. And like I said, I have a unique platform to work with. And so I want to use my platform and the resources that I have to show up in this unique time that we're living in. Unique and challenging time that we're living in.
Because it is a unique and challenging time right now, Erika, where does your hope come from, if you have any hope?
I always try to be optimistic and can't lose faith. Even though we are living in unique and challenging times, there are some wonderful and amazing things that are happening. And so just focusing on, the good and controlling what I can control.
In your tenure of being in philanthropy or in your life, that if you made any special mistakes or failures, I like to call them, that ultimately was a benefit to how you got to then think about the world moving forward?
I feel every day I learn from my failures.
Good company.
But I will say early on in my career, I probably approached this work a little bit differently. I approached this work on maybe I knew best. And so I would create programs and platforms and think it was so amazing what I came up with, right? And then I would bring it to the community and it would be good. But I always say, if you're not really helping the community with their issues, it's not going to, whatever program or platform that you create, no matter how good it is not going to be sustainable. And so once I started taking a different approach to how I showed up in the community and did more listening, instead of, I use the example, instead of creating a program where students have to read 5 books, and then if they read their 5 books, they can come to a game, that's just one more thing teachers and parents would have to do that they might not have the time to do. Well, I'm you could earn a ticket to a game. How great is that? But then if I sat down and actually spoke to, the superintendent at the school or of the district or folks from the district, and they're like, your reading program is great, but we're really struggling with attendance. Chronic absenteeism is our issue, and then if I'm okay, if chronic absenteeism is the issue, what resources do I have to help with that? Right? Then maybe I change my reading program to be focused on attendance, or what are some other reasons that kids aren't showing up to school? Okay, once I understand the root of this issue, then what can I do to assist with it? And so I started to approach the work more of, really sitting down with the community to understand what their needs were and then figuring out what I could do to help.
Did it help with attendance? Did kids show up?
We didn't do a program where if you showed up to school, you would get a ticket. What we did look at was that there were some students that were not showing up to school during the winter months because they didn't have the proper gear. So we took 5 pilot schools. We were then gave each one of the students in the schools a winter coat, a winter hat, gloves, scarves, everything that they needed. Then from that, we can track to see if attendance has gone up in those winter months. If they went up, then great. I can then go to more schools and give them, winter gear as well. And so it's, sitting down with the people to kind of figure out what those needs are and then what I can do. And then, being able to see what the KPIs are. And then how do we then, grow that program from there. Another issue was for chronic absenteeism was that kids weren't coming to school because their clothes were dirty. If families are choosing between feeding their family or washing clothes, they're probably going to feed their family. So, okay, what is something that we can do to assist there? Well, we partnered with one of the Pistons players, Cade Cunningham, when I worked for the Pistons, and we partnered with GM, and GM and Cade were able to provide washer and dryers for every single school.
Oh, wow.
In Detroit, where then families could go to the schools to wash clothes free of charge. Okay. Now kids are coming to school more. So there was things like that, but how would I have known that, sitting in a conference room trying to come up with an idea?
That's right.
I wouldn't have. So for me, the way I approached the work, like I said early on in my career, I thought I probably knew best of what the community needed instead of really sitting down and understanding what the needs were and then working from that vantage point.
For those who are losing their federal jobs, those who are getting laid off right now because those numbers are pretty rampant as well. Is there any advice that you might give to them regarding a mission-driven, mission-focused career path that might relate to philanthropy? Though I know, of course, your position is a unique one, but other ways that they might think through how to be useful in the world and also have a career, or purposeful in the world and also have a career in philanthropy.
I never sought to work in sport. For me, it was about how can I give back? So it was always working for a foundation, working for a nonprofit. Like I said, I kind of fell into sports, but I see the power of sport. And there are a lot of, I would say, mission-driven, unique jobs out there. But really, you have to stay true to your core kind of values and what you're passionate about. And when you lead from that vantage point, then you will get a job, or you will be placed where you are meant to be. And it might be a corporate job where you are bringing the philanthropy into that organization. But there's so many, I would say, organizations, not just nonprofits or foundations, but corporations that have philanthropy built into what they're doing. And if they don't, then that would be an opportunity for you, if this is something that is important to you, to maybe bring to an organization to see how you can build up this, arm. Because what I will say is this generation, or these Gen Zers, I would say are more socially conscious and want to support organizations and companies that they know align with their values. And so I think that wherever you are in your journey, you can bring that to the table, even if it doesn't exist yet.
Philanthropy sort of exists out of abundance, out of surplus, and that if it's not already there, there might be the funds to make it be there. If you can just get into the decision makers' space of helping them understand and see how being more philanthropic within their activities could be possible.
The job market is not great, but even if you have time right now and you volunteer and you continue to show up, that if they do then have an opening, then more than likely, you can slot in if you are a hard worker when you're there.
For fans who are excited about players, but don't want to be supportive to their foundations or to other causes that they're excited about, because they may not have a foundation, but they might be working with you or through a DAFT or through fiscal sponsorship. What are some ways that fans can connect with the philanthropic priorities that some of their favorite players might be excited about?
So on the Players Association, on our social channels, we're trying to tell more of our player stories so that you can see where our matching grant dollars are going. You can see what our players are supporting and what they're passionate and care about. Also on their social channels, they're often sharing kind of their where they're giving or some of their initiatives. And if they don't have their own foundation, but you see that they're supporting a local boys and girls club, like you can be supportive by also supporting that organization. You can, like I said, it goes back to what are your time, talent, and treasures that you can provide to those same organizations. Some of them will publicly fundraise. And if that's something that you want to support, I'm sure that they would appreciate it. And then there's ways that you can support our foundation as well, or the work that we do that helps to support their initiatives. But I would say if anyone has questions or wants to know how they can get involved with the work that we're doing, then I'm always happy to have a conversation. We have a few nonprofits that we are going to be partnering with that are providing additional funding for some of the work that our players are doing.
How do you identify which causes, which nonprofits, which programs to help a player be better connected to, as opposed to, nonprofit A or nonprofit B? Is there a community of data, a database that you're pulling from, or is it relationships that you already have or that they might already have that helps you connect them with the right community for them?
It's definitely relationship based in terms of how I decide, not how I decide, because really I'm there to help the player figure out and decide how they want to show up in the community and making sure that it's authentic and genuine to them. So for me, it's just getting to know them as people. I think they have a certain lens and view on them from the outside public. And for me, I am not there as a person who is asking them for anything, and really just trying to get to know them and their families and their inner circle, to understand them as, not just a basketball player, but, who they are, how they grew up, where they grew up, and then being able to take the information that I know and make suggestions on maybe how they can show up in this space.
So of the leagues in the country for pro sports, the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, the NBA has one of the largest representations of Black players. And prior to it being a trend where players could be pro racial justice, the NBA players have had some leadership in that space. And then even when it's no longer the sexy thing to do, NBA players still have some leadership in that space. And I wanted to see if you've seen any trends with the philanthropy that some of the players have related to either equity, racial justice.
There is a social justice coalition. It is a joint venture between the NBA and then the Players Association. That coalition was born out of the bubble. And the players using their voice and speaking up around kind of, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and some of those killings that were happening in that time frame. And players were saying, this is bigger than basketball, and we are not going to play until we are actually, there's actually action taking place. And so a few things happened, and one of those was the Social Justice Coalition. Players were very vocal in the bubble about making sure that the NBA and the Players Association and the players were holding themselves accountable in this space. And so you see the Social Justice Coalition, they're doing amazing policy work, amazing work around second chances. And we do have a lot of players that are involved, sit on the board, along with owners and representation from the NBA and Players Association.
Erika, so often in philanthropy, there can be this huge gap between the funder, the donor, the philanthropist, and the actual communities that need those funds. And one could imagine that same gap exists between, let's say, players who want to give and the communities that need some of the funds that they want to create impact with. And so I wondered for you if you had any insight or advice to communities, nonprofit leaders who are like, hey, X player loves to give blank, and that is exactly what we're doing. If only we knew how to connect with that one player who says that I really want to give to this thing, but they don't even know that that we exist.
And there's no easy answer to that. I will say it is hard to just reach out to the player. But most times they're with an agency. So reaching out to the agency, even something as simple as messaging on social media, it really depends on what the organization is and what they're raising money for, and that tie or connection. Again, we try to encourage players to give where they already have a pre-existing, kind of relationship and connection. So if they grew up in the Boys and Girls Club, then how do you then reach back and give to the Boys and Girls Club? Starting with the Boys and Girls Club that you grew up in. And then from there, those folks can make connections maybe to other Boys and Girls Clubs, to the community in which you play. I think really it's about having conversations and listening. So when you see a player and they're doing amazing work in a particular area and you're like, this is a great fit for my organization, continue to do the good work. Continue to tell your story in on social media. Send it to a player. Sometimes they see it, sometimes they don't. Send it to the team, send it to the agent. Sometimes it will get seen, sometimes it won't. But usually when you're doing the good work, and your work is going to get noticed somehow, some way. And I feel like it's not by accident when these connections are made.
One of the things that LT talked about in our last conversation together was this sense of, go to where the players are. So a lot of players are in the community. They are doing either community service work, or they're having a local food drive, and going to them, trying to create ultimately whether it's pro athlete philanthropy, or whether it's just good old fashioned foundation or individual donor at your church philanthropy, that ultimately it's all relationship based. That ultimately this is about people giving to people, people supporting people. And it sounds very much like the more communities who might think that they're a good fit for a player's giving can build their relationships by going where they are. It seems like that could be a way to start closing this gap of they're over there, we're over here, and we don't know how to connect. It sounds like finding people where they are is one way to connect.
Absolutely. And it's mutually beneficial. So you can't just always go with an ask. How are you showing up and supporting them as well? Are you going to the games? Are you supporting their initiatives and events? So I always say, how can we make this a mutually beneficial partnership, relationship?
You had mentioned that there are some players that give and nobody knows about it, and that it's a very private thing. And it's interesting, as someone who's been in fundraising for a bit of time, I guess since 2011 in some capacity, we say in fundraising that giving begets giving, that when someone gives, it begins to create a pressure, social pressure, competition, enthusiasm around giving. So if Erika is giving and I know Erika, well, then maybe I need to give too, or maybe I need to give more than her, whatever it is. We'd love to see people competing on how much they love through their giving, right? But whenever someone says, I don't want to let people know about my gift because I want to keep it very private, I want to be humble, I get all of that. We all get all of that. But we also know the less people know about so-and-so's giving, the less people are inclined to also follow suit or follow that example. That's a long way of saying, have you seen it helpful for players to share that they're giving, and that's also generated additional giving either through other teammates or through their fans or through their community?
Like I said, they have such an amazing and unique platform, so they are inspiring. And it's give and take. When some players don't want it to, be advertised about the work that they're doing. For me, I'm always like, hey, maybe we don't talk about everything that you're doing, but what can we do to bring light to this situation? It might not have to be you advertising that you gave X amount of money, but maybe, you're sharing information about why this cause is important to you. So there's a give and take there as well. But yes, we know that they are, the work that they're doing are inspiring others. And sometimes players will say, I remember when a player came to my school. So that's why it's important for me to now go back and do the same thing. So it just varies. Yes, but yeah, we try to get them to, not necessarily boast about everything that they're doing, but how do they take what they're doing to bring others along?
In our very first episode with a colleague, C artist Gardner Glazer, she had said that, foundations, when people are talking about foundation giving, so a grant making foundation, that people often ask, how big is your endowment? It's X amount, $1 billion, and that's the number that people brag about. Her thought was, what if we bragged about our giving? It's not how big is your endowment, but how much are you giving of your endowment? That we could start to be in competition with how hard we love one another, how aggressively we love one another by going into our pocket in order to serve one another. And so it sounds very much like there's a place for that within pro athletes space to be able to say, if they're already competitive anyway, they know how to compete, yes. But if they could compete on how they love, not just, for some donors, it's a tax liability reduction. We all understand that. And I imagine it's the same thing for some players. It's a great way to lower one's tax liability, but it's also a great way to transform people's lives. And the more that they can show that, the more that can create pressure for others to, well, maybe I need to love a little bit harder, would be awesome. So thank you for Erika for being a part of that, for advising these men in a way to be, like you said, do the local thing, show up on Thanksgiving, that's awesome, but this family needs food year round. And so how can you be even more impactful throughout their lives, throughout your community, throughout this country, throughout this world. So we're grateful for you, Erika. Remain grateful for you. What is it for people who are supportive of your work and believe in your leadership, Erika, and want to support what you're up to? What is the best way for them to connect with you or at least stay aware of what you're up to in the world?
Yeah, I mean, come to the PA social channels and follow us. We put a lot of our players' work on those channels, also on LinkedIn. Really, we just want you to interact with what we're posting and support the work that our players are doing. That's on and off the court.
Erika, as we wrap up today and as we are coming to a close, is there anything else you'd like to share before we scram today?
Thank you for holding space. Like I said before, we are stronger together. So however we can work together, that's how we are going to really invoke real change.
For our listeners, we are grateful for you. Thank you for trusting Erika and me with your time today. She's going to go back to her desk. I'm going to go back to my desk. We know you're going back to your desk. And so we always say you're not alone in this work. You matter and you count and you're valuable.